The shiur is dedicated to Nishmas Rachaleya Bas Rav Chaim Tzvi. We're continuing with the Malacha of Bishul, and we spent the last year really getting into depth about the concept of Ain Bishul Achar Bishul. Just to recap the bottom line, we pointed out that the halacha is that we generally assume that Ain Bishul Achar Bishul is no cooking once you already cooked with a davar yavesh. That's for sure. On a doraisa level, there's certainly no iser bishul with a davar yavesh if it's already been cooked before Shabbos. When we say cooked, we mean fully cooked. However, when it comes to a davar lach, that we saw a major machlokus harishonim. The view of Rashi, the Rosh, and the Torah was yesh bishul achar bishul b'davar lach. When it comes to liquid, by definition, since the whole definition of cooking by liquid is merely a function of the temperature yatsa letizbo, so therefore, even though it's already been fully cooked, once it cools down below yatsa letizbo, so then there's going to be an iser bishul, bringing it back up again. The sheet of the Rambam is that there's no difference whatsoever between a davar yavesh and a davar lach, between a solid or a liquid. In all cases, he assumes Ain Bishul Achar Bishul. And then we saw in Siman Shin Yud Ches Halacha Daled this seemingly compromise, Siman Shin Yud Ches Halacha Daled, and also Halacha Tezvav, the compromise view of the Ramah. And the Ramah says that when it comes to a solid, for sure Ain Bishul Achar Bishul. When it comes to a liquid, so he says the minhag is that if the liquid has been its time lagamre is fully cooled down, then indeed yesh bishul achar bishul, exactly like Rashi in the Rosh. However, in low its time lagamre, if it is not fully cooled down, even though it's below yatsa letizbo, but it's not fully cooled down, then you could still go ahead and reheat it. And we pointed out the machlokos haposkim, whether that's really a third shita, or in principle the Ramah agrees with the Rambam's view that really Ain Bishul Achar Bishul Afilu b'davar lach, and this is just a chumra ba'alma. And we saw some applications, whether there's going to be a prohibition of refilling a teacup or a soup bowl that has droplets in it, a few other ramifications as well. Now we want to move on to a related but different issue, and that is, sure, we assume la halacha Ain Bishul Achar Bishul. After all, once something's been fully cooked, so then subsequent cooking, you're not really substantively doing something. After all, it's already been cooked. This is just reheating, not cooking once again. Okay, that's true when you do the same process one after the other. You did bishul, now it's cooled down, now you're going to do bishul again. But the halacha recognizes that there are different ways you can go ahead and cook something up. One method is called bishul, and that is when you cook something up with a liquid medium. You want to go ahead and boil an egg. Boiling, that's bishul. When you put something in water, you cook that up, the water gets hot, thereby heating up the food that is being cooked. That's called bishul. There is something else called afiya. Afiya, baking, we translate. That's really a kind of dry heat, where you put something in an oven, there's a fire, there's a heat, and you bake something with that dry heat. That's called afiya. Then the third category is tzliyah, is roasting, where you have an open fire. Afiya is a closed fire. Tzliyah is an open fire, and you roast something up on an open fire in that fashion. So the question that the Rishonim deal with is good. Ain Bishul Achar Bishul, but what is the din, for example, of Bishul Achar Afiya? Is there a prohibition of Bishul Achar Afiya? You ask me, where does this come up? How can this apply? I baked something and then I went ahead and, am I allowed to cook it after I baked it? So on the one hand, you'll argue that this is not a problem. After all, it's already been prepared. It's no longer raw. It was baked. Now you're cooking. What's the difference? It's already ready for achila. However, on the other hand, maybe you'll argue this is a new process. The cooking process is fundamentally different than the baking process, and therefore you're doing something fundamentally different to the food. It has a different taste as a result of cooking, and maybe we'll assume that yesh bishul achar afiya. As I mentioned, where did this come up? So a good example is, are you allowed to go ahead and dip matzah or bread and the like in your soup on Friday night? Because if we assume yesh bishul achar afiya, so when you go ahead and bake your bread, good, that's before Shabbos, that's your afiya. Now you're going to take that bread and put it into soup. So that's hot, yatsa letizbo, going to cause some impact on the bread itself. If we assume yesh bishul achar afiya, that might be prohibited. And this will have application in all different scenarios of bishul achar afiya, afiya achar bishul, tzliyah achar afiya, all the various permutations that you find. This is a major issue, la halacha. And the discussion really is centered around a Mordechai, which is found in Masechet Shabbos in Siman Shin Beis. And I'm going to read you the words of the Mordechai. He writes as follows: Afal pi she'ein bishul achar bishul. Even though there is no iser bishul achar bishul, mikol makom yesh bishul achar afiya utzliyah. There is a prohibition of bishul after something, let's say before Shabbos, was roasted or was baked. There will be an iser bishul achar afiya utzliyah. So it's going to be aser. And then the Mordechai continues, says, I'll give you a proof. We have a proof from a Gemara in Maseches Psachim on Daf Mem Aleph, Amud Aleph. What is the proof? What is going on there in Psachim? So we know there's a halacha that the Korban Pesach has to be specifically roasted and has to be eaten roasted, Tzliyah, and you're not allowed to, there's an Isser of Bashel Mevushal. You're not allowed to cook the Korban Pesach. That's for sure going to be a problem. So the Gemara here, Maseches Psachim, Daf Mem Aleph Amud Aleph, has the following question. What is the din if, for example, you did Bishul of the Korban Pesach, then you did Tzli, then you roasted it, or the reverse. You did Tzli, and then you cooked it afterwards. Is there a prohibition of Bishul of the Korban Pesach if the Bishul was done in conjunction with an